Thanks for staying after the break. In the morning, earlier in the first part, we heard about speakers talking about the importance and some of the thought-provoking talk about how do we look at promoting AI ethics. Now, my presentation will talk more about the engineering side, talking more about how developers can go about designing AI systems that is aligned to ethical principles and systems, and more importantly, Singapore, as we all know, we are very pragmatic in what we do. What kind of systems can be put into place in Singapore to make sure that happens? So I'm from AI Singapore, and from Monica earlier explanation, let me give a little bit of what AI Singapore is. AI Singapore is one of the first in terms of a multi-agency effort back in 2017. We were formed back in 2017 to really more of the government respond to figure out what do we need to do with AI. 2015 was when AI started picking up, and it is logical for us to take a look, us as in Singapore, to take a look how AI can actually benefit Singapore. So I belong to AI Singapore, which was founded back then to figure out what do we need to do, what programs do we need to put in place, so that the value of AI can be harnessed for the whole of the country, not just citizens, not just businesses, but it's also for the government as we look at putting in policies that will make sense and help us to navigate this space on AI. So I'm going to touch on these two broad topics. A little bit of disclaimer here. Let's look at, there were previous definitions of ethical AI that was spoken earlier. Let's look at how World Economic Forum actually defines the top 9 ethical issues in AI right now. First is unemployment. What happens if machine learning or AI took over most of the jobs that is currently available now? Second is, of course, another topic about inequality, social inequality. How then do we distribute? You can see the formation of world-class global spanning companies, organization, Facebook, Google, all that. And in many ways, they are not your traditional company because they actually don't sell any product. And if you have read most of articles and even some of the shows, right, it will famously say that what they are actually selling is you. You are the product, right? And they take a lot of money. They earn a lot of money in doing so. So how do you distribute such a wealth that is created by AI that is extensively used by Google, by Facebook, by YouTube, etc.? Humanity as a whole, how is machine, or specifically, how is AI or how is automated decision making actually affecting our behavior and interaction? And then AI bias, I'll touch a lot more about that. Prof Luckin and Prof Mark Findlay also talk about data bias, all that, and that's a topic I'll cover later. Security, how do we keep AI safe from adversary? Soon, we will see autonomous driving, or at least assisted driving system that will be more and more prevalent in our cars and vehicle. And for a lot of autonomous vehicles that rely on computer vision-based system, that means camera, you might or might not be aware that today there's already a possibility that as a camera vision system autonomous vehicle navigate the road, they actually identify road signs and identify road symbols as we humans do, a stop sign, a zebra crossing, a speed limit. Already it is possible by putting in a few cleverly pasted stickers that you can fool a machine learning camera on an autonomous vehicle to think that the stop sign is actually a 45 miles per hour road. So instead of stopping, it will be thinking that the speed limit is 45 miles per hour and continue on. Consequences, as you can imagine, might not be quite favorable for pedestrian. So how do you keep AI safe from adversary? How then you guard yourself from mistake? as you rely more and more on machine learning algorithm to make decisions for you, how do you actually safeguard that it is making unintended decisions? And I'll talk about later some examples that is not so critical, and some examples that if you leave automated machine learning system to run on its own, the consequences can be quite dire. Singularity. As we move further down the road, we talk about this concept called AI general intelligence, or AGI. So if that happens, how do you stay in control of such a machine sentient intelligence that you have built? And then how do you actually protect it against unintended consequences? Now imagine you build a super AI and you ask the super AI to say, how can you resolve world hunger or world poverty? What if the algorithm compute that humans are the source of all these things? Remove the humans and you won't have poverty or hunger to speak of. Evil geniuses. And then last but not least, a topic that is very touched on by many science fiction movies and novels. How do you define the humane treatment of AI once you have given birth to something that you can actually call a sentient being? All right. If you look at it, top three are global scale social re-engineering. And to be honest, it's actually not constrained to AI or machine learning. Replace the word AI ethics, you replace the word AI and you replace it with another technology, they are all the same, right? And 7, 8, 9, these are currently not in terms of current development, at least not in the public domain knowledge. So what I want to focus on is 4, 5, and 6. These are things that we can look at, these are things that we can control, and these are things, as Prof Luckin said, AI consumers, one may not necessarily code AI algorithm, but you should understand enough about what AI does, and importantly, the limitation of AI. So, to have a discourse on AI ethics, I think is important for us to understand is the capability and the limitation of modern AI, or what we call machine learning, right? Some of the subsequent slides that I'm showing you are actually from AI for Everyone, which is a free learning resources that AI Singapore has developed, and more about that later. So, the way I'll explain what AI is or machine learning is, think of it this way. I usually use this example when I teach. A machine learning model is like a car engine, and then the engine is mounted on a car body, or in this case, it will be your smart application. And then what's left is the fuel. The fuel that goes into the engine, this is what we now know as data. Data is the new fuel, or data is the new oil, right? So with this analogy, machine learning model as an engine is mated to a chassis that goes somewhere, and you need to put in the fuel for the car to go anywhere, which is the application. Let's take a look at this picture. And most of us would probably recognize this is the picture of Neil Armstrong, Memphis landing on the moon, right? But when you feed this picture to a caption board, this is what it says. So it was fed into caption board back in 2015, right? It says that this is a picture of a man standing on dirt field. Now, you'll be thinking, how come it's actually interpreting this way? Now, then think about it a little bit more. Engineers, so when we talk about machine learning models, we train machine learning models, we know how to build a machine learning models, we know how to fine-tune it to achieve its highest performance. So these are machine learning models that have been trained to deliver what is intended to do. But many machine learning models are trained with very clean, very sterilized data sets that has little resemblance to real world data, right? So you guys ever heard of the term GIJO, garbage in, garbage out? You train with biased data, you will come out with biased model. Prof Mark Findlay talked about bad data. So if you train a machine learning model with bad data, you will get biased model, right? So some examples. In 2016, Microsoft launched TAI. It was meant to be a conversational AI bot, but people who interacted with it enough to make it so that after it's finished learning, conversing with humans, all it can respond is actually racist remarks. So 2016. In 2018, Amazon has a recruitment tool that he has trained with his recruiting data. And what it then realized, it actually shows a prejudice against female applicants. There could be many, many reasons, but I guess the most obvious is none of the training data actually shows that female applying for a job or a particular job actually succeed, or there wasn't actually much female actually applying for the job. So in 2019, there's Apple Card. So when it comes to them determining what's the credit line system, there was also some bias that was built into it. Perhaps certain race, certain ethnicity shows poor credit rating. So therefore, decided not to condemn the card. So earlier examples of this may not be harmful, but automated decision-making without any human supervisor vision can actually have quite dire consequences. So this is one. AI sending people to jail and getting it wrong means that they are doing assessment that is actually not fair and just. And these are some themes that are actually explored by movies like Minority Report, etc. Next, neural net learns to identify a criminal by their face. This is where you take machine vision system and start training them in the mugshot, and whoever actually put up this experimentation has a value proposition that he or she is trying to prove, but it may be nice on an academic setting, but if you do really deploy it in the real world, consequences can be actually quite bad, right? So, well, it has been 10 years since modern AI or machine learning burst into the scene with the seminal paper from Geoffrey Hinton, Dr. Fei-Fei Li, or that through ImageNet. So the good thing is 10 years has passed and the knowledge of building, developing, training machine learning models is largely democratized. Today, you can watch YouTube video to get a sense of it. You can also attend courses online, or you can attend courses that is developed by universities or polys or that. How do you actually train a machine learning model? So that knowledge of democratization is really done. And right now, when you look at the practitioners, the machine learning engineers, the scientists, or that, what we are now looking or focusing more on now is not just learning how to build and train a machine learning model, but how do you actually build a safe and effective model or solution that has built-in ethical design? There are many, many areas. Earlier speakers spoke about this, and there are many literature that you can look at. But these are some of the common foundations that I see and our organization see. First is fairness. As I spoke about earlier about garbage in, garbage out, bias comes from data during collection. And a lot of data actually is generated historically from human. If you have a person that is always scoring negative for a particular, if let's say there's a teacher always scoring negative for a particular set of students or that, and you use the historical example to train machine learning models, they will actually come to the conclusion that certain class of students are bad. That's it. So garbage in, garbage out. So fortunately, there are a lot of systems now, and one of the more famous one is Microsoft Fallon. Microsoft Fallon allow you to put in your data and your model, and what it does, it will tell you, for those familiar with machine learning, or this term called hyperparameters and weight, it will tell you what certain data sets or features has an undue amount of influence on the output of the machine learning model. And by an engineer analyzing that data bias or different weights or weights that is too much influence over the whole machine learning model outcome, they would know to pay special attention to the particular data set. Next is robustness. Robustness is when we talk about this AI being able to train with different data sets. So I spoke about how a lot of machine learning models are trained in the lab with clean, sterilized data set that has no bearing to real world data. So we look at how the model is robust when it's put into production, right? So the engineering principles behind. Third is explainability, and in that, actually, there, no pun intended, you can actually explain AI explainability in different areas, right? Some will spoke about how it is actually able to, how you can actually run the AI model training forward and backward. You can actually reproduce that. Particularly important, imagine if you decided that there's a court case involving a smart system that uses a machine learning model. The judge will actually need to know how the machine learning model arrived at that decision that resulted in whatever consequences there. And for that to happen, you need to actually be able to simulate the whole training of the data, train, and the output. And you probably need to do it forward and backward, forward and backward. So explainability, that's one very important aspect. Second is in one of the Q&A that actually Jinglong brought about, which is true. A lot of modern AI that you see or hear in the news are of the fact based on this training methodology called deep learning. And deep learning is where you throw in data into a neural net, and effectively it's a black box because you don't know, you roughly know how it maps, but you really don't know how it really maps. And you don't understand why it derives certain data. So how do you explain machine learning models? That explainability is also very important. On itself, each one of them is very important, but if you combine it together, it is a foundation where you can actually build a more safer, effective AI that human can come in and adjust the control so that it becomes more ethical. So for my work in AI Singapore, I look at talent, certification, as well as standard, right? We practice what Prof Luckin said earlier in the first presentation. We believe that not everybody will develop AI solution, but as consumers consume more and more AI solution, they actually need to be AI savvy to be able to make intelligent and responsible decisions when interacting with such solution, right? And thus, it's very important to have these two sides of the equation, right? You need to have AI producers that understand by building and training a particular model, what is the consequences when it's put into production, when it's put into a position of making machine data-driven based decision that the machine itself actually don't know has real-world ramification. And on the other hand, you need consumers that can understand how smart application and system can affect their life. So a lot of state strategies and a lot of media news that you spoke about is how it's very important to be skilled in AI. You need to learn to code. You need to learn how to build models or train models. In AI Singapore, we feel that the equation is both equally important. We need people who learn how to research and develop new machine learning models. We need people who know how to use existing models and develop relevant, innovative, and really real-world changing applications, the engineers. But equally, you also need intelligent AI consumers. And for that, then there is a possibility where a trustworthy AI environment comes in. Because when you have AI-savvy consumers, it gives them the basic ability to consider whether this market AI product or smart product is compliant, is credible, or the very important aspect, is it respecting my rights and my value, right? Simple example, if an insurance company decided to use AI just to base all your application without a human person talking to you, and because of whatever reason, you are deemed not eligible for basic health insurance or mortgage insurance or whatever kind of insurance, that is actually denying your basic human rights in a society. So concepts like human in the loop, human over the loop, all that, this becomes very important. So to encourage a trusty AI environment, this is what AI Singapore and my team is focusing on a lot. Monica mentioned about the certification program for AI engineers. Why are we doing so? We want to do so because we want to set a baseline standards for AI practitioners and AI engineers, which AI Singapore also do as part of our program, not just in technical proficiency, but also to promote the creation of a professional body that will peer review and that will also self-regulate as we look at what are the ethical principles that is coming up and that is becoming more of a standard rather than a guideline, right? So in 2019, we announced about this certification framework. Last year, we actually ran a few runs of AI Certified Engineers Qualification Program. Last year, AI Singapore, together with some of our industry mentors and partners, catalyzed the growth of the world's first grassroots-driven organization for AI practitioners. So we call it AI Professional Association. So AI Professional Association is a grassroots body formally registered with Ministry of Home Affairs under the Registrar of Societies. And what they intend to do is they will actually grow this profession called Chartered AI Engineer. For those familiar with terms like CPA, CFA, or even the term like Chartered Engineer, we already have in a lot of mission critical industries, you have the concept of certified public accountant, you have the concept of chartered engineers, you have the concept of financial accountants, all that, right? So we have decided to set up the world's first chartered AI engineer. And over the past 1.5 years, there are already 176 registered chartered AI engineers, and these are displayed in the National Registry. And that's just for Singapore. AI Professional Association is working and will be working with international chapters and organizations over the world to look at growing this profession. Now, by growing this profession, you now have a industry recognized AI practitioners and engineers that will also be introduced, and they also will be fierce proponent of standards that's introduced out by IEEE, ISO, SC42 with regards to AI ethics audit. So these people then will be the one that will spearhead the charge to ensure that safe and trustworthy AI models or machine learning models are put into production. So what about you then? As a consumer, I spoke about the importance of you having enough knowledge about AI to make that basic judgment call, right? So in AI Singapore, we have we're not a training provider, but we do offer free learning resources, and most of the resources actually are created by our own machine learning engineers. So there's this thing called AI for Everyone, and inside the AI for Everyone, there will be topics that talk about what's AI, why AI now. It is structured as a 1.5 to 2 hours video, instructional videos that you can actually watch and then answer some simple quizzes, right? And towards the end, after chapter 9 is done, actually we bring you to a little hands-on so that you can play with graphical user interface, drag and drop model on how to train your first machine learning models, right? Now, this AI for Everyone was launched back in 2018. And in 2019, it's already adopted as a AI foundational course for all polys and ITEs. And as of early this year, in April of 2021 this year, MOE has also incorporated AI for Everyone inside the SLS space. So it's available as a learning resources. And one more logo here, Civil Service College in July this year also adopted this for all public servants. Depending on NIE structure or the actually government agencies under the CSC Learn, they are already going through this, right? So this is one of the two. So there's the other one, which is a literacy in AI that goes a bit deeper. So down here are all simple facts and knowledge. If you want to go a bit deeper, we offer this also free module, Machine Learning for Everyone. And then we put in a bridge version of AI ethics for you to actually go through as well. It's based on PDCC, and also based on some of the concepts like Microsoft Talent, IBM AIX 360. This AI ethics module, this abridged version, is actually a version of what we actually apply to all the chartered AI engineers that I spoke of earlier. For chartered AI engineers that gone through the professional qualification program, they are also expected to be able to be versant on AI ethics as well, right? So with that, that ends my presentation. I have a little slide to share because I saw Rina Liang's comment on PDPC. Prof Mark Findlay spoke about the PDPC. You might, for those of you who actually want to go into practical implementation in your school, on that PDPC, in terms of our AI ethics and governance framework, which I sit on the roundtable body, which we produce this material out, it talks about human involvement. In its essence, it means that AI is good, AI is great. At the end of the day, you cannot let AI dictate your decision. It is just a tool, just like Excel is a tool. PowerPoint is a tool. You use Excel to do some computation on it, but you will actually look at the results. So human in the loop, human over the loop, very important. And that pervades across internal governance structure, operation management, and even how you communicate to stakeholders. So another thing that PDCC AI ethics we spoke about is recourse. There must be fair recourse for consumers who would complain or put up grievances against automated machine learning decision models that actually prejudice them, right? To the end, actually, PDPC, we created something else called the ISAGO framework, stands for Implementation and Self-Assessment Guide for Organization. In that is broken down into five different sections, and in these sections, there are different questions that you can actually ask yourself as you look at rolling out AI. They are by far no means to be interpreted as a law. It's meant as a guide, which is in line because machine learning, deep learning, AI, this is still in flux. So what we do is we promote more of self-governance and self-policing. So we put together the ISAGO so that you have guiding questions to think about it as you implement the systems, the AI or machine learning models in your organization.